Are you learning your scales as a newer piano student, or maybe you have your scales learned already and you're looking for some other ways to practice your scales to get the most out of them and to actually master them even more? Well, in today's lesson, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you just a couple of extra ways you can start practicing your scales to really get your brain working. Because after working on your scales for a certain period of time, they get kind of old. I mean, especially once you mastered them, it's the same old routine. So if you want to mix it up or get your brain thinking, like I mentioned, the first way of practicing your scales a little bit differently is, first of all, I do recommend learning them the regular way in parallel first, like this. But then the first way I suggest is starting from the same note and playing the scale in contrary motion. So parallel, obviously you're going at the same rate at the same time. With contrary, you're actually starting from the middle and going outward and then coming back in. Now a lot of students actually find this way, especially with the C major scale, to be easier to play than parallel. And one of the main reasons behind that is that before, when we were playing in parallel, the finger crosses were happening at different times, which, as you know, is very important in playing your scales properly. However, when you do them in contrary, the finger crosses, believe it or not, happen at the same time. So after I play this first, second, third note, I'm going to be crossing with both hands at one time, in and out. So start with C, since that's easy. The challenge comes in when you start doing different scales and different sharps and flats, because the sharps and the flats you have to be aware of between each hand. And I'll show you what I mean. So say I'm doing the key of G, and if you know your scales already, you know G has an F sharp at that next to last note. So when you're starting in contrary motion, you got to be careful, because the very next note, there's a sharp here with your left hand, but not with your right hand. And then you have to be careful. The finger crosses do still happen at the same time, at least with the easier fingering scales. Now you have to be careful here at the next to last note that I have a sharp here and not here. So as you play more difficult scales, it becomes more of a brain exercise, because you're really trying to figure out, okay, where the sharps are happening, and then sharps or flats are happening, and then also at what times are they happening between each hand. So this now it makes the fingering the same, but where the sharps and flats meet up are now different. So that's where the challenge comes. Try it, in a multiple of different keys. Obviously you probably want to start going around the circle of fifths, and what I mean by that is it's just the easiest way to practice your scales. You start with the one with 0 sharps, 0 flats. Then you go up 5 notes. You play that scale. And that one has 1 sharp. Then you go up 5 notes. You do that scale. That one has 2 sharps. So when you do it in the circle of fifths, it's going in order of the sharps. And that way you're practicing your scales in a way that makes sense, because it's going from easiest to hardest. You don't want to go from the C major scale and then try the C sharp major scale, which I'd probably have to practice in contrary motion first, since that one would be a little bit more difficult. Whoops. Oh, yeah. I did it. Not too much trouble. I had to think about it a little bit more. So a little bit of a brain teaser for you. And then obviously you want to go through all your scales till you learn even those scales with the flats in them as well. All right, let's get on to the second way I recommend you change things up when practicing your scales. Okay, the second way I recommend you start practicing your scales is practicing them in thirds. So remember from a lot of lessons we had before, all a third is it's 3 notes away. So seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, etc. are all intervals telling you how far away they are from each other. Well, a third is 3 notes away, 1, 2, 3. So a scale in thirds means that you're starting on the original note. We're doing the key of C, make things easy. You're starting on the original note with your left hand, and then with your right hand, you're actually starting on the third note of the scale. Thus, I mean, it's more of a tenth since you have the octave in there, but it's a third. Like that. I mean, you can play them in the same octave, but I find that my hands trip over each other a little bit that way. But anyway, you're starting on the first note here, the third note here. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that this changes when the fingers cross. So now the challenge again is figuring out when the fingers cross rather than where the sharps or flats are. So it adds another dimension of thinking there. Like I said, these are all really to just get you thinking more rather than just playing the scale the same way every single time. So when you're doing thirds, like I said, you'll have to really be careful the fingering. Now you're going to do the fingering the exact same way you would do it when you're doing the scales in parallel. You just have to keep in mind that by starting on that first, the third note with your right hand, that you're immediately going to be crossing there because that's when it happens normally anyway. All right, and then after you go through the key of C, then you want to learn them in the key of G. Oops, I messed it up. Oops. So even for me, it takes a little bit more thinking to go through. And you want to continue going around in your circle of fifths like we just talked about so that you're practicing them in a way that makes sense. You're going from the easiest scales possible to more and more difficult as you go on. So go through and practice them all that way. And then if you really want to, you can even try some really strange stuff. You at least want to do the contrary in the thirds, but you can start doing some weird stuff. Like you can play a C major scale down here and then a G major scale up here. Now the notes are all a fifth apart. And actually if you play a scale 5 notes away, it'll always sound okay. It'll sound a little weird, but not bad. And then this challenge here now is that you're thinking about one key signature in one hand and another key signature in another. The fingering, though, is easier on this one because it's just the same fingering as you would with a normal scale. So in that way, you don't have to think as much about it, but you do have to think in terms that there's a different key signature up top and a different key signature on the bottom. Now you may be thinking, where is a practical use for that sort of thing in music at all? You know, like when does that ever come up? It doesn't really seem like it would ever come up at all. Well, it does in a way you might not expect. So say you have a song in the key of G major and you have a chord that has a sharp in your left hand, and then you have maybe a chromatic kind of note going on in your right hand. Then you're really going to have to be thinking about maybe not two different key signatures, but just thinking that, okay, there's an F flat here and an F sharp here. So that'll kind of gear you towards that. But the most practical ones are the contrary and then practicing your scales in thirds. I should have thought about that when I was playing it a little bit more. So you want to, basically once you learn all your scales in parallel, start practicing them in these different methods. And, if you feel like this is really helping you, which it should because my teachers always taught it to me, let me know in the comments. I would always love to hear it, or any questions you might have about playing scales. We actually have a great question right here. Okay, Javon asks, how often should we practice scales? A great question. You should practice your scales every time you practice, or almost every time you practice, as a warm-up. So scales, arpeggios, a lot of the practice kind of things that aren't really songs, they should really be practiced routinely as part of your regular practice routine. How about that? And it should be a regular thing. Now, if you feel like you're getting burnt out on them, it's okay to take a day off from them here or there. But generally, you want to have that good habit of adding them in each time. That is when they are most effective and most useful. Okay, if you want to learn more about playing scales, I highly, highly recommend you check out this playlist that I'm going to put on the screen somewhere that can direct you to learning more about them. And also in the description. The description's always a great place to find extra information or things to practice or extra videos, lessons to watch. So this has been Tim from Lessons on the Web. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you for the next lesson.